Today we are going to see class 5 and we are going to see the topic would be attribute data extraction, and we are going to upload the data from flat file into SAP BW info object. So this is your second example. In your previous class we have seen how to upload the data, text data, into the SAP BW info object. This is your example 2, and we are going to see how to upload attribute data into the info object. So example, extraction of attribute data from Excel into SAP BW info object using flexible update method. This is your example, and type of data we are working with attribute data. Type of source system, we are uploading the data from Excel, so this is your source system, and type of source system is file system, and we are going to upload the data into the BW system, so target system is BW system. In BW system we are going to upload the data into the info object, so data target is info object, and we have to upload attribute data, so type of data source is attribute data source. We have to upload the data in this example using a info source type called flexible update. So type of info source is flexible update method. So I discussed about this example, and whatever we are seeing here as a technical terms, I discussed about each technical term, like we are going to work with attribute data, and the source system type is we already discussed in our previous sessions. Excel and Notepad we consider as file systems, and target system is BW system, and data target is info object. The master data like attribute data, text data, and hierarchy data we always upload into the info object. Now first of all we should know what is attribute data. Attribute data in the sense it's a reference data of a one key. Now text data in the sense it's a descriptive data of a key, and attribute data in the sense a reference data about a key. Now reference data in the sense, say you have employee ID and employee name and employee date of joining and department designation and cost center he belongs to. All these obviously act as attributes, and you can even include salary also as a attribute. Now this information is reference information for this key. So this data for this key is known as this data name and date of joining, department, all these known as attribute data. You have one more key called material ID. Now material group, material color, material weight, material height, all these obviously we call it as attribute data. Now say you have a key like customer ID, customer name, and customer address, and we have phone number and street number. All these we consider as attributes for customer ID. In similar fashion, you have vendor ID, then vendor name and address and fax number and first name and last name. All these are reference information for vendor ID, so we need to consider as attribute data. Now if you have comp code, company code, then the country where this company is belongs to, and the currency in currency that particular company runs in that currency, and the street number where we have company address. All these are obviously attributes for comp code. Now whatever we are seeing here, employee ID, material ID, all these are key fields, and this information is reference information for this key field, so this is attribute data. Now how to upload this attribute information? If it is maintained in the Excel sheet into the SAP BW info object, we are going to see today, and our update method is flexible update method. Now let me come up with example data flow diagram and steps involved in this. We are going to work with number of steps in order to fulfill this example. And first step, create Excel sheet with attribute data, and this is your first step. And second step, create file system. And third step, we have to create info area. And 3.1, create info object catalog. 3.2, create characteristic info object, and we have to maintain attributes. Then fourth step, create application component. 4.1, create info source, and we need to create flexible info source. 4.2, create assign info source to data source. 4.3, maintain communication structure with info objects. 4.4, maintain transfer rules and activate the transfer rules. Then fifth step, we need to insert characteristic as data target. Then sixth step, we need to create update rules and we need to activate update rules. Then we can see the data flow diagram. Create info package and schedule the data load. Then monitor the load, see the content in the info object. So these are the steps we need to perform in order to upload the data into the info object from Excel sheet. Now consider I have data something like this: attribute data, employee ID data I have, then I have an attribute called name and date of joining and department. So these three obviously were attributes, or if you are storing this data in a table, then we call these as reference information and we set up these as data fields, and this is main field, key field. So this is key field. So we have four fields and unique data we store in the key field. Unique data in the sense EMP01, 02, 03. All these are unique IDs for employees. Now Sridhar, Vikas, Vinod, Pramod, and we have Karthik. All these are names, and date of joining we have to come up with certain format, and the format would be 2015 01 02 means 2015 is year, 01 is month and 02 is date. January 2nd 2015. And departments, apps, application department, and we have ITO, another department. Now this is my attribute data I have to upload into the BW system. Now if I need to upload into the BW system, so obviously how many fields we have in the source? We have four fields, so we need to create four info objects. Now we have attributes for employee ID, so we are uploading attribute data for employee ID. For that reason we have to create one basic characteristic info object. We have to create one basic characteristic info object, and I'm naming this one as employee ID 1. So this is your basic characteristic info object, and which is going to hold employee ID's information. For this employee ID we have three attributes. So attributes means data fields. These fields data, again, it should be uploaded into the info objects only. So what we do, we create three info objects and we do maintain those three info objects as attributes within the main info object. We are going to maintain these three info objects. Okay, let me highlight these three info objects in different color, and I'm highlighting in green. So these three info objects I'm going to define as attribute info objects for the main info object, and main info object let me denote it with red color. Okay, and now see, in order to understand in a more clear way the data fields whichever I have shaded in the source system in green color, and that information will be stored in your BW as attributes of employee ID. Now we created 1, 2, 3, 4. This is employee info object, and this is name info object, date of joining info object, and department info object. Now I have to upload the field information into the info objects, and the key field in BW side we have to create key fields data. We are going to hold by the basic characteristic info object, and we created as employee ID1, and this is one info object, and the other info object would be name 1. Then we have date of joining 1, and this is also info object, and the other info object is department 1. Fine. Now whenever you create info objects, the system automatically creates the corresponding fields. So what field system creates? /BIC/. So this is a corresponding field system generates for every info object, and for this system generate a field like /BIC/, and system automatically creates a corresponding field for every info object. /BIC/ is prefixed for your info object, and that is nothing but your field. Now once info objects were created, corresponding fields will be generated. If you know data dictionary concepts like domain and data element, for every info object the domain and data element will be generated by the system itself. Now we have fields ready, and system is going to create a table using these fields. Now this field system will define as key field whenever system derives a table, and these fields are going to define as data fields. Now whenever we create info objects and whenever we maintain other info objects as attributes, then system creates a table, and this table is going to be something like this. Within the info object, system creates a table, and this table is known as P table. P table will be generated for employee info object, and the table will be generated something like this: /BIC/P and EMP ID1, and this particular field is going to act as a key field, and along with that we can have OBJ observers, and we can have one more field called the changed field, and we can have other fields like name and date of joining, then department. All these fields will be generated as part of your P table. Now once fields has been generated and system is going to make use these fields, and system will generate a table within the info object, and this is nothing but your attribute table. Once table has been generated within the info object something like this, then what we can do, this data employee 01 data can be transferred to this particular field, and the name information can be transferred to this particular field. So once we create info object and once we maintained the other info objects as attributes, system generates p table, and it's almost identical to your source system structure. And so the data can be transferred, date of joining can be transferred, and the department data can be transferred to here. So whenever we trigger IP, system is going to make use a structure called transfer structure, and system is going to make use another structure called communication structure, and in between you can see the transfer rules, and because of the transfer rules the data can be transformed, and finally because of the update rules the data can be updated into your p table. P table is part of your info object, so you can transfer the data and finally store the data in this p table. So in order to transfer the data, obviously we have to come up with all these steps. So we are going to see all these steps in the system, and parallelly whenever I perform a step within the system in Excel sheet, I'm going to come up with the data flow diagram. Okay, let me make use this space for data flow diagram. Okay, now first step, creation of Excel sheet. We have source, and source is Excel sheet, and source system type is file system, and we have source something like this. Source is having data, this is the data we have, so let me keep this data here. So we have source system with data ready. Then this data has to be transferred into BW side, and this is master data, so we need to transfer into the info object. Now the first step is creation of Excel sheet, and we have to keep this data in the Excel sheet. This is your first step, and I'm performing this step. Creation of Excel sheet with attribute data. Create Excel sheet. Now I'm creating Excel sheet with same data. Let me copy this data from here and let me paste this data here, and I'm saving this. And whenever we save, we need to save it as .csv, and this is employee underscore attribute data. Now go to desktop, and I'm keeping this file on the desktop itself. Okay, yes, then close it. Now we have Excel sheet ready with the attribute data. We have to transfer this data into BW system. So if you want to transfer the data into the BW system, then there should be file interface in between BW system and the source system. Now the creation of file interface is second step, And in order to perform this file interface creation, we have to log into the BW system, and we have to run a transaction called RSA1 old. Then you will be in administrator workbench. Then you have to click on source systems and right click the source system and create the source system, and you have to select this file system and you have to click on continue, and then you have to give technical name here and we have to give description here. These are steps to create the file system, and today I'm not going to create any file system. The reason is, in your previous class we have already seen how to create file system. So we already created file system for e-learning sessions, and I'm going to make use same file system here. Before using the file system, what we have to do, we have to check the connection. Now connection is okay. So once we created interface, you can make use that interface n number of times. For Excel, for every Excel upload, no need to create a separate file system. Now yesterday file system we have ready, and we are going to make use this file system. The file system name is elearn_fs. Then we have to create info area, and info area is a folder, and this step is your third step. And under info area we need to create info object catalog. This is also a folder. And in my previous session I discussed like info area is a folder, info object catalog is a subfolder, and within this subfolder we are going to place info objects. Info objects are two types: characteristic info objects and key figure info objects. In order to hold characteristic info objects, we need to create info object catalog for characteristics, and in order to hold key figure info objects, we need to create info object catalog for key figures. Now key figures for holding measurable data, and characteristics are for holding non-measurable data. Now we do not have any measurable data here, so in this case we are going to create characteristic info objects, and before to that we need to come up with a characteristic info object catalog. So first of all, let me create this folder and this subfolder, and in order to create info area and info object catalog, what we have to do, we have to create these two. We have to create these two at info objects level. Now we have already existing info area, already existing info object catalog. We can make use existing info area and existing info object catalog. No need to create again and again these folders. So how to create, I'll show you. This is the place where you can create info area, and this is the place where you can create info object catalog. Simply click on continue and give technical name and description, and if you click on continue, then easily we can create info area and info object catalog. In our previous sessions we already discussed how to create info area and info object catalog, so I'm not creating any new info areas, and I'm going to make use one of the existing info area and one of the existing info object catalog. Now within this I'm going to create, within this catalog I'm going to create a new info object, and we required 4 info objects. Now I'm creating one info object called emp id1. This info object is useful for holding employee data. emp01, so data type is char and length is 5. Activate it. Now first info object has been created. Like this, we need to create other 3 info objects. Other 3 info objects: name, date of joining, and department. The next one, name 1, name, continue, characteristic, length 10, activate it. Then age, date of joining 1, this is date of joining, and that would be the data type. Then I am creating one more info object for department. Data type and length, apps and ITO, so length is 4 and data type is characteristic. Now we created 4 info objects. Now let me come up with the 4 info objects. Employee ID, and we created name and date of joining, and finally we have one more, department. Now this is employee ID, and for this employee ID only we have 3 attributes. So what we have to do, we have to include other 3 info objects as attribute info objects within this employee ID info object. So whenever we include something like this, then system is going to generate a table, and this table is P table. This table is P table. Now system will generate fields. As I said earlier, system will create fields. This is your first field, and this is going to act as key field, and we have other fields: name, date of joining, and department. So system is going to define P table something like this. Now system is going to define this one as a key field and all 3 as data fields. Now see, you have a structure in the source system and similar kind of structure in the BW side. Now in order to transfer the data into this info object, we required data flow objects. Now we created simply 4 info objects, and we didn't maintained 3 info objects as attributes for main info object. Now I'm going to perform third step. We have 4 info objects: name, department, date of joining, and employee ID. Employee ID is main info object, and within that I am maintaining attributes. The first attribute is zname1. I'm sorry, it's not zname1, it is name1, and second one is date of joining, and third one is department. I think I have created ZGPT1. Okay. Now name one, date of joining, ZDEPT1. And these are the info objects we created, and after inserting these three are as attributes, then activate the info object. Now whenever you activate the main info object employee ID1 after inserting other three as attributes, then the system is going to generate a p table. And if you open this p table, you can see employee IDs and two technical fields and attributes, all these part of your p table. Now come back. We have completed p table, and this is nothing but your 3.2 creation of info objects. Then what we need to do, we have to come up with the data flow diagram. We completed this step and we completed all three steps. Now I'm performing fourth step, creation of application component, and application component is a folder which is going to hold the related info sources. Now I need to have a info source. I'm coming up with one info source, and info source always contains a structure called communication structure, and this info source with communication structure creation is your 4.1. So in my previous example, I have already created application component. Now go to /n r7 old, go to info source. We have existing application component, and I'm not creating new component. I'm using same application component. This is the place where we can create application component. Now I'm not creating any new one, I'm using existing one. Within this I'm creating a new info source as part of 4.1. I'm uploading the data to employee ID1, and I'm uploading attribute data. So I'm giving technical name something like this. By seeing this technical name, we'll come to know attribute data we are uploading into employee ID1. Then click on create. Now what we have completed, we completed this one. Then we have data source assignment. Next step, after completion of these two, the next step would be we have to complete, all these steps were completed. Next step would be we have to assign info source to the data source. Now whenever we assign info source to the data source, system will generate the data source, and this is representation of data source. And let me represent, and your data source always consists a structure called transfer structure, and transfer structure always contains fields, and your communication structure always contains info objects, but we have to maintain info objects first. See, I'm performing 4.2 step, that is assignment of info source to the data source. Now let me perform. Right click this one and assign to the data source, and here we have to give the technical name of the source system. The reason is data sources are belongs to source system. Then click on continue and click on yes. Next step, 4.3 communication structure. you have to fill communication structure with info objects. I performed this step, and now I am performing maintenance of the communication structure with info objects. Now what info objects I created, you have to use those info objects here. We have to use created info objects, employee id 1, then the name id 1, and whatever way we have sequence in the source system, in similar fashion we have to fill date of joining, then department 1. Then 4.4 step, propose the transfer rules. Click on transfer rules and propose the transfer rules and activate the transfer rules. Now I performed maintenance, and later on I performed 4.4 also. So what I performed, I created transfer rules in between these two structures. Then info objects will be generated here and corresponding fields will be generated here, and these two can be connected using your transfer rules. Then once transfer rules were turned into active status, then what we have to do, we have to come back, and now system is generating a program for data transfer process, and this is transfer rule program, and which is useful for transferring the data from your data source fields to communication structure info objects. Now transfer rules were activated, come back, and we have info source ready. The next step, insert characteristic as data target. In order to insert characteristic as data target, we have to go to administrator workbench. First we have to select info providers, then we have to right click the e-learnings and info area. Then we can see insert characteristic as data target and employee id 1. This is your attribute data target, and now we inserted this one as data target. This is your employee id 1. Now this is acting as a data target, and this is acting as an attribute data target. Once it is acting as an attribute data target, then we can create update rules. Insertion of characteristic as attribute data target is 5th step, and creation of update rules is 6th step, and we missed one step here, the transfer rules creation, and that is your 4.4. Now we have to perform 6th step. In order to perform 6th step, right click this one and create update rules. Update rules are going to connect your data target and info source, so we need to come up with info source name here, then activate the update rules. Once update rules are activated, then we have to see the data flow diagram. This is your data flow diagram, and we can see the data flow diagram as a 7th step. Right click, go back and info source, and this is your info source. Right click and show data flow diagram. This is your data flow diagram. Now you can compare with your Excel data flow diagram. Info object, update rules, info source, transfer rules, and here I didn't maintain any PSA table, but in your data flow you can see PSA table, and this is attribute data source, and this is source system. Attribute data source, and we have source system. Once data flow diagram is ready, then as a next step we need to create IP. IP creation is 8th step. IP is going to interact with the source system, and it is going to schedule the data into the corresponding fields of your P table. It is going to schedule the data into the corresponding fields of P table. Data, whenever you schedule IP, data passes through transfer structure, transfer rules, communication structure, info objects, update rules, and finally data will be available in P table. In order to create IP, right click the source system and create the info package and give description, and we have employee, text data, no, employee attribute data, okay, I couldn't found employee attribute data. Let me see. This is the file we generated, and it is there in C users del. C users del. This is the file. Okay, let me copy this file. Into the desktop. Then I am selecting the file using the file path. Now desktop, employee attr, and this is .csv file, and comma would be the separator. Number of header rows to be ignored 1, so you don't want to transfer header data. And then schedule the IP. Now what we have performed, the 8th step, creation of IP and make corresponding settings, and finally we schedule the data load. Now data was requested. This is your 9th step, monitoring the data. We have 5 records. 5 records were loaded. Monitoring is completed successfully. Then we have to see the data in the data target. This is your data target, which is nothing but info object. And if you want to see the content, then select this table and click on the content. Select the table and click on the content. Then clearly you can see the data. So this is the data we have in the info object, and if you want to see the same data in corresponding P table, then go to /bic/p and emp id1. This is your P table. Display it and see the content by clicking the content. And execute it. This is the data we have uploaded into the info object. Within the P table, we are able to see the data. The text data, whenever we upload, we are able to see in T table. T means text table, and attribute data we uploaded into the P table. T table, P table, both are part of your info object only, and these two tables are known as master data tables. The only reason is these two are holding the master data, so these two are known as master data tables. And master data we upload into the info objects, and whenever we upload into the info object, then the text data stores in T table and attribute data will be stored in attribute table. So this is your attribute upload from Excel sheet into the SAP BW info object using flexible update method. Thank you.